It starts with heat. On the skin of the International Space Station, sunlight pushes temperatures toward 120 degrees Celsius. Inside, a web of sensors and software keeps the air breathable, the humidity right, the crew alive. Fail the code, and the orbiting habitat turns into an oven. Now, picture this. Somewhere in South Florida, a 15-year-old lies on his stomach in a small bedroom, elbows deep in a beige PC tower, a tangle of Ethernet cable at his feet. He isn't a spy. He isn't a mercenary. He's a kid. And tonight, he slips quietly into 13 NASA computers. To him, it feels like solving a puzzle. To the United States government, it looks like the start of a national security incident. The kid who opened locked doors. His name is Jonathan James, but online he goes by Comrade. Long before he touches government networks, he's the child who takes things apart to see how they breathe. While other 6-year-olds play tag outside, he's indoors, face lit by a CRT, learning the shape of logic through games and the raw alphabet of a command line. His father tries parental controls. Jonathan breaks them. Not to be cruel, because there's a door, and doors are meant to be tested. By his early teens, he has a rhythm. Read C manuals, stare at Unix source, trace the intent of strangers line by line. At one point, he wipes Windows off the family machine and installs Linux without asking. He spends nights in that quiet hum only a computer room knows. Curiosity becomes compulsion, and compulsion becomes skill. Here's the difference between mischief and malice in his mind. Mischief proves what's possible and leaves a note. He likes to slip into a network, map the weak joints, and send a message to the admin. Your firewall trusts the wrong interface. Your passwords are in the clear. Here's how to fix it. He isn't there to smash the glass. He's there to touch it. In 1999, he aims higher. The Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville runs a collection of systems that support the ISS, including code responsible for environmental control. He finds a path inward. Exact steps unimportant here, but the shape is familiar. Weak perimeter, patient reconnaissance, a foothold that grows. 13 machines answer him. On one, he pulls source code tied to the station's life support control, a package later valued at over $1 million on paper. He reads it like a textbook. The point isn't sabotage, it's fluency. NASA's reaction is immediate and expensive. Systems offline for weeks, audits, cleanup, the sound of closed-door meetings. The agency counts the cost in dollars and disruption. Months later, he finds another threshold, this time at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, an organization that models nightmares, nuclear, chemical, biological. He plants a backdoor on a server in Virginia, listens to traffic, watches credentials flow. He gathers employee logins, some with access far beyond that one machine. To him, it still feels like proof. To the government, it's a siren. January 2000, dawn knocks. His mother wakes him with a sentence that freezes the spine of every hacker. The FBI is here. Agents carry out 5 computers, a Palm Pilot CDs, even his Star Trek paperback. He's 16. He confesses. He promises to stop. For months, silence. Then comes the weight of consequence. The youngest person yet convicted under U.S. cybercrime statutes, he gets house arrest, restrictions, letters of apology to NASA and the Department of Defense. A probation violation later sends him to juvenile detention. His father will say the experience changes him. Quiet edges dull into something withdrawn. When he emerges, Jonathan wants distance from keyboards and courtrooms. The excitement wasn't worth the cost. He says he's done. But the story of a prodigy retreating is about to collide with the story of a kingpin ascending. The kingpin's game. Albert Gonzalez is another child of the 80s who grows into code. Online, he wears many names, but the one he likes best borrows swagger from a sitcom, Soup Nazi. As a teenager, he too nosed around NASA systems, enough to warrant attention. In the early 2000s, he brushes against federal agents and makes a choice. Work with the United States Secret Service as an informant and avoid prison. That should have been the end of his criminal arc. It wasn't. At roughly the same time, an underground bazaar flourishes. Shadow Crew. Forums where stolen identities, bank logins, and card numbers move like contraband on a river. Gonzalez drifts through that world while reporting on others, playing both sides of a mirror. The legitimate paycheck doesn't match the pull of the illicit ones, so he writes his own plan and gives it a title that sounds like a mixtape. Get rich or die trying. You can see the scheme in a parking lot. Two men sit in a car with a laptop and a high-gain antenna. This is war driving. Find a business with weak wireless, get within range, and slip in while someone scans inventory inside and wonders if the coffee is still hot. The programs they deploy, sniffers, quietly harvest track data from card readers and point-of-sale terminals as customers swipe for printer paper and post-it notes. Later, the stream of numbers flows to Gonzalez. He forwards bundles to a specialist who cracks pins. Then, the factory begins. Blank mag-stripe cards imprinted with stolen identities, ATM withdrawals in bursts, cash stacked in closets, accounts drained before banks realize the pattern. Once the method works at one retailer, the crew repeats it at scale. Big box stores, clothing chains, book retailers, wholesale clubs. The list grows like an indictment. BJ's Wholesale, Boston Market, Barnes & Noble, Forever 21, and the biggest score, TJX, the parent of TJ Maxx, Marshall's Home Goods. In that breach alone, tens of millions of cards are exposed. Over several years, investigations will tally up to an almost incomprehensible number. Data from roughly 180 million cards touched by the scheme in some way, with corporate costs, reissues, lawyers, forensics, bleeding into the hundreds of millions. Meanwhile, law enforcement chases the signal. The same agency that once paid Gonzalez for information now sees patterns that point back at him. Threads tug at names that overlap with Jonathan James's old world. Mutual acquaintances in the hacker scene, including Christopher Scott, a friend to both men, who rides shotgun on those war drives. Spring 2008, South Florida again. Agents knock on the same family door they visited when the boy genius was 16. They search the house where Jonathan now lives with his brother. They take inventory, find a firearm, find an old note that reads uncomfortably like a goodbye, and leave with suspicions. Somewhere in the paperwork appears an alias, JJ. Investigators think it might belong to Jonathan James. He insists they are wrong. He says he walked away years ago. He feels the trap closing anyway. There's a document that circulates in underground circles, a grim survival guide written by a hacker who turned informant and then inmate. It teaches a lesson Jonathan has already learned once. The justice system plays to win. He reads it like prophecy. He knows Gonzalez has history with the feds, knows informants bargain with names. He imagines a narrative where he's easier to sell than a well-connected thief. He sees a future he cannot live with. 2 weeks after the raid, in May 2008, Jonathan James takes his own life. He leaves passwords, goodbyes, and a note that reads like a verdict. He has no faith left in a game he doesn't believe he can win. The system moves on, as systems do. Investigators keep pulling at Gonzalez until the threads finally reveal a barrel of cash, over $1 million, buried in a backyard. Courts sentence him to 20 years in federal prison for the campaign of thefts that rattled retailers and banks. His friend Christopher Scott receives 7 years for his role. And that JJ in the reports? The name later ties not to Jonathan James, but to another figure, Stephen Watt, known online as Jim Jones, charged for writing code used in the attacks. It's a brutal symmetry. The quiet prodigy is dead without a conviction. The kingpin lives to face a courtroom. What talent deserves and what fear destroys. The easy way to file this story is as two parallel arcs. The kid who pokes the bear and pays too much, and the thief who steals at scale until his luck runs out. But if you care about the world you live in, the one run by networks and terminals and quietly humming servers, you should file it under something harder. What you do with talent that scares you. Jonathan James broke rules. He also sent "help me help you" messages to the very people he spooked. He looked at code the way a pianist looks at a score, somewhere between architecture and music, with room for improvement and grace. He wanted to demonstrate how locks fail. He believed that was useful. The response he met, raids, cuffs, letters, made him a lesson for others. It also carved fear into a teenager who by all accounts needed structure, mentors, and a path to build instead of break. Albert Gonzalez broke banks. He did it with intent, profit as a principle, and a willingness to work both sides of a badge. He used friends as tools and strangers as a currency stream. The system that deputized him once learned too late what he did when he wasn't reporting in. It paid for that lesson in court time and restitution and thousands of small bureaucratic headaches, reissued cards, refactored networks, rebuilt trust. Between those poles lives a reality we keep relearning. The same hunger that lets a 15-year-old slip into a mission network could teach him to harden one. The same skills that steal 1 million card numbers could fortify a retailer's lanes. What you reward and what you crush decides which way that hunger turns. You can hear echoes of this case every time a headline shrieks about the largest breach to date, every time a Patch Tuesday closes a hole someone almost certainly found months earlier, every time a promising kid spends a night on a forum instead of in a classroom, because the forum listens and the classroom doesn't. You hear it when agencies debate whether to prosecute a teenager to the fullest extent of the law or to put a seasoned engineer in the room with him and say, "Build with us." There's no easy moral in a life that ended too soon. There is, however, a ledger of choices. Parents chose to confiscate a child's computer before they learned to aim his curiosity. Administrators chose to ignore emails from strangers warning them about soft walls. Corporations chose convenience over encryption. An informant chose greed over reform. Agents chose who to pressure and how. A young man chose the only control he felt he had left. So here's the version of this story you'll carry with you. Heat on the ISS Skin, a line of code that keeps a crew alive, and a kid in Florida who wanted to understand how it all worked. Here's the parking lot outside a chain store where a laptop drinks secrets out of the air. Here's a judge tallying damages like a calculator. Here's a barrel of money in a backyard. Here's a note on a kitchen table. When you build systems that hold people's lives and money, you build them for two kinds of audiences: the ones who want to learn and the ones who want to take. If you treat both kinds like enemies, you'll get more of the second. If you give the first a path, apprenticeships, bug bounties, clear safe harbors, mentors who say that this is how you do it right, you stand a chance of starving the second. The laws will keep punishing. They have to. Theft is theft. But punishment alone doesn't prevent the next largest breach to date. What does is refusing to waste the kind of mind that reads $1 million code base for the joy of understanding it and then sends a note saying, "You left the back door open." Somewhere, a teenager is staring at a terminal, thinking the same forbidden thought that started this story. What happens if I press here? What we do next decides whether he becomes a shield or a ghost.